Greetings and salutations. It's good to see you again to another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. Let me introduce, first of all, the one, the only, Jacob Prash.
You don't need more than one, thank God. Here he is. Blessings in Jesus, and thank you so much for joining us. Aren't we happy that he is indeed coming soon?
Amen. Praise God. And of course, one of my favorite people in Tennessee, David Lister.
It's excellent to be here with you again. Good job last week, and we're looking forward to a better job this week. I just want to set the standard high for you.
That's right.
Thank you for adding the pressure.
That's right.
And of course, where would we be without Davey in Australia?
That's right.
Good morning, brothers. Good to be here with you.
All right. So I have the Jolly Swag Man. I have Jubilation Tea Corn Pone. I'm here in Britain. And of course, we have Brother James. Yeah. Let's do it.
All right. Sounds good. Just wanted to start off by reminding you that everything that you see here, plus so much more content, is available on podcasts. I could go through the list. We are on Amazon. We're on Spotify. We are on Apple. We're on Podchasers. There's just so many ways that you can catch up with both Jacob's teachings, David's, Marco's, and now Kang's Corner on our podcast. So we want to thank you, make these available for you. Just wanted to check, David, do we have any announcements as far as fellowship drives?
Yes. Fellowship drive starting in July 13th. We'll be out in the Portland area. You can get that on Twitter, on the Moriel B Alert, the Facebook, and as well as if you have constant contact, you'll be sent the schedule, times, the phone numbers, things like that, where we're having meetings. And we're looking forward to Washington and Oregon. God willing, we're going number 4 will be with Jacob coming this fall.
Praise God. So many people have left South Africa because of the crime and the political and economic crisis there, but there are still a number of believers left there. And of course, our work with Ebion, although it's very different than what it had been with the Children's AIDS Ministry, it's evolved into something very different because children survived who we thought wouldn't have because of antiretrovirals and God's grace and the hard work of Dave and Lynn Royal and their team. Nonetheless, we do have an ongoing work in South Africa. The Lord has not abandoned the believers in South Africa, and neither have we. So the South African branch of Moriel is looking at me coming back there for a brief visit this summer, sometime this summer, probably be in the next month or so. I will keep you posted as to that. Also, I don't normally plug books other than books written by Moriel authors such as Scott Noble or myself, but there's one book I am reading now. Now, we are familiar, and many of you will be familiar with the things already in this book, but it is a great handbook to have, to be familiar with the issues facing the church and to be able to communicate these things to other people. It's called Counterfeit Kingdom, and it is authored by Holly Pivick and Douglas Givet. Holly Pivick and Douglas Givet, published by B&H Publishing, and it is a great book on the New Apostolic Reformation. Now, again, the things in it are basically the things that Moriel has been saying for some time, going back to the Restoration movement in Britain in the 1980s, through the counterfeit revivals of Toronto, Pensacola, etc., but bringing it forward to the New Apostolic Reformation and its adjuncts. This is a good book, and it's a book I certainly recommend. Should be available on Amazon. It is available on
Amazon, everywhere. Yeah.
It's a book well worth reading.
Lots of good quotes, Jacob, by the leaderships that just nails them to the wall. Look, what we talked about, we knew how bad it was then. It's only gotten exponentially worse and this book shows how bad it really is.
Counterfeit Kingdom, that's the book. All right, James, down to you, sir.
All right, so let's get started with catching up. So the first story that we have Jacob, you brought it to our attention. A Christian group that was offering conversion therapy recently had to go to court because their bank account was closed by Barclays. And it was closed specifically because they offered services of conversion therapy. Jacob, can the governments of the world and these banks work together to shut down all of us if we don't agree with their ideology?
The same as the governments of the world, particularly the left-wing governments of the world, including the American government and the intelligence community, the deep state, are working hand in hand with Silicon Valley and social media to silence opinion and to circumvent the First Amendment. The banking establishment does the same thing. Now, the precedent for this, most conspicuously, was set in Canada by someone I just consider to be an enemy of democracy, an enemy of Christianity, and frankly, if I was a Canadian, I would say an enemy of Canada. I speak of Justin Trudeau. His father was no bargain, and he is much worse. When he basically froze the bank accounts of truck drivers peacefully protesting during the Canadian government's mismanagement of the COVID crisis. This began in Canada, but then they began going after Christians based only on the complaints of homosexual LGBTQ activist organizations. Barclays closed down under the pressure from the homosexual activists. Stonewall type movements of people like this. Might not have been specifically Stonewall, but it was others. And they went after the bank. You're giving banking services to these people who are helping people transition back to being heterosexual. They went to court and they fought. They got some damages, not a huge amount, about 20,000 pounds or a little more, but they got the accounts reopened. Appealing to Caesar is scriptural. Appealing to Caesar works. We may not always get the victory, but Paul appealed to Caesar. The apostles appealed to Caesar. It has a biblical precedent. It has an apostolic example, and it is something we need to do. Militant homosexuals, Muslim activists, pro-abortion activists, all of these people appeal to Caesar. Why should Christians not appeal to Caesar when we see clear New Testament precedent for doing it? Now, I know some Christians are very naive and pseudo-spiritual in their thinking, unfortunately, and I say that not to demean them. They're really wanting to be sincere and devout, and they say things like, well, we're going to be persecuted, and we just have to leave these things with the Lord. Now, we're called to fight to the degree we're able to fight. Now, there comes a time when you can't fight anymore. Jesus shut up at his trial. There comes a time when you can't fight anymore. A time is coming when no man can work. In the meantime, we work, and in the meantime, we fight. The Bible does not teach a bunker mentality. It teaches an ark mentality, a way of escape, but it doesn't teach a bunker mentality. These Christians in Britain, with the support of some Christian legal charities, fought and won. Thank God they did. But this has gone beyond this. We have Nigel Farage. This is a major figure. He is the champion of Brexit, of saving Britain from the European Union, from the EU. Okay, God saved Britain from the Spanish Armada, from European conquest. God saved Britain from Napoleon, and God saved Britain from Hitler and the Nazis. Well, God saved Britain from Brexit. He was at the forefront of it. He was the founder of the UK Independence Party. Now, they've closed his personal business bank accounts. He's a businessman. They closed his personal bank accounts and his business ones, and they've closed bank accounts of his family. Not only that, other banks would not open accounts for him, and they would give no reason. They say we're not obligated to give a reason. It's purely a commercial decision. It was obviously a political decision because he was opposed to the socialist agenda of Britain being governed by an unelected socialist bureaucracy in Brussels and those who are still sympathetic to it. They're blaming him for Brexit. I applaud him for Brexit. Others on the other side of the spectrum blame him for it. They actually closed his bank accounts. Now, when they will go after major figures like Donald Trump in America or Nigel Farage in Britain, there's nobody they won't go for, unless, of course, it's Hunter Biden or Joe Biden. They get a pass in the corrupt justice system we have under Merrick Garland and the FBI and things like this. They get a pass. But nobody is immune. If they can go after a former president of the United States or the founder of a political party in Britain who was a national rallying figure to get Britain out of the clutches of a non-democratic Europe, they can go after anybody. Well, they're going after Christians already in Britain. Certainly, Canada is where it began. They'll be coming after all of us if they can, and when they can. We need to use wisdom. We need to have God's guidance in our finances, where to bank, offshore banking. We need to play the system as wisely as we can and as long as we can with the wisdom and direction of the Lord. We are called to be innocent as doves, but wise as serpents. We are not called to be naive in our dealings. When you have a corrupt federal government, a corrupt deep state, a corrupt intelligence community, a Gestapo, a political Gestapo, FBI, when you have a Justice Department that's completely corrupt, when these things are being run by people who should be indicted themselves, and when open criminal actions like Hunter Biden and his father, nothing happens. There's no justice except God's justice. There's no justice. We need to realize persecution is coming, and to a degree it has already come. We need to act accordingly with God's wisdom. And that includes God's wisdom in how we manage our finances, as well as God's wisdom and how we manage our communications. That is why Moriel and some of its affiliates like RTN have our own servers. Why we tell people, please don't watch us on YouTube. Watch us on Rumble, watch us on Moriel TV. Watch us elsewhere, but don't watch us on YouTube. We need to get people to put themselves outside of the reach of the powers that be in social media, in corrupt government to the degree legally possible, and certainly the banking system, which is completely corrupt. Always has been, but it's become corrupt to the point of unbelievability.
David, you deal a lot with finances. Canada and UK, we're seeing a weaponized banking system going against people of a different political ideology, also faith at this point. Do you feel that things like this are going to come soon to the American banking system?
Well, it actually already came to America's banking system until all the banks, they did a law back after the economy crashed back in 2008. They put in laws called the bail-in laws, where they've changed. If you are FDIC here in America, that is just deposited. It's not necessarily insured anymore. It's just part of the system. And they can actually reach into your account and take your money in case of a national emergency. So the laws are already placed. You can Google Investopedia and read about bail-in and see what it's done. All the Western countries have got these in place. And so just like Trudeau cut people's off, Malta took a third of people's bank's account just overnight. They shut it down on the weekend. You woke up Monday and a third of your money's gone.
That was Cyprus.
Cyprus, sorry. Thank you, Jacob. And so they've already done the test run. They know it works. And when you become an enemy of the state, so-called enemy of the state, they can reach into your bank accounts and turn you off. That's how, they don't have to worry about, I was talking to an Iowa farmer. He says, well, I've got my guns and everything. I said, well, who are you going to shoot? I said, they're going to turn your electricity off. They're going to take your nitrogen away for farming, and you've got your guns. Well, who are you going to shoot? It's, you're not going to be allowed out of your city. You're not going to be allowed to do this, and people have to come to the realization we live in a time where you will not be able to buy nor sell without a mark. But I think the time leading up to that time, it will be persecution, and it will be doing this to individual people, dividing and conquering, instilling fear in people so that they can control them easier.
Absolutely. So, finances have been weaponized. Now, let's talk about the media is being weaponized. And talking about our favorite person, I have a video here that I would like to share. This is something that's going on in Canada right now.
Extremely disappointing to see that Facebook continues to refuse to accept its responsibility towards our democracies by refusing to pay the fair share for Canadians to get local news and independent, rigorous journalistic content. Their decision to walk away rather than engage constructively is disappointing, but we are very much there to continue and to have conversations with them about how to make sure we're both supporting journalists and ensuring that Canadians can continue to function online in free and open ways. I will say that the conversations with Google are ongoing. It is important that we find a way to ensure that Canadians can continue to access content in all sorts of different ways, but that also we protect rigorous, independent journalism that has a foundational role in our democracies in holding authorities to account and keeping citizens informed about what's going on in their local communities and around the world.
Rutherford unperson. Substitute Ogilvy. Ogilvy bio details as follows. War hero, recently killed Malabar front. Today awarded posthumous Order Conspicuous Merit Second Class.
I'm sorry, who put that clip of 1984 in there? The Ministry of Truth.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have a talk with somebody. Jacob, talk to me about Trudeau. How can we get to the point where now Canada, unless it's state-sponsored media, state-sponsored news, it's just not going to be available for Canadians?
Again, Trudeau has always been an enemy of democracy. If I were a Canadian citizen, I would consider him to be an enemy of Canada. He's an evil man. He's not just a politician. He's a particularly evil individual. The man is evil. He's, of course, a globalist. He is very much in that club of Davos. And he wants to consolidate and centralize power along the same lines as any other socialist. Remember, socialism misrepresents itself as being for the people or for the public. It's not. It's for the elite. It is for the elite. Socialism is much closer to feudalism than it is to capitalism, libertarianism, or democracy. It's closer to feudalism. You have professional revolutionaries. In Russia, this was Bolshevism. A popular revolution was taken over by a revolutionary elite led by Lenin. They were the privileged class, the party members. They were the overlords. That is what they want here. In feudalism, you have the nobility, the aristocracy, and you have the vassals, and then you have the serfs and the slaves. Well, people like Trudeau represent an ideology that wants to turn the Canadian middle class into a population of serfs. It wants to take itself into the position of having vacillating bureaucracy controlled by a party elite. It is Bolshevism, but it is really not Bolshevism in the sense that Bolshevism evolved. It was Bolshevism ideologically, the same kind of model, but it's not going to be like Sovietism. It is going to be like feudalism, like feudalism. That is the way it's going, and that is the way it's going to be. You must get your news from us, otherwise you can't have access to the news in Canada. This is Pravda, TASS, Izvestia. Exactly what the Soviets did, exactly what the Nazis did, and it's exactly what Trudeau does. It is a neo-feudalism masquerading as a Canadian socialism.
I forgot who said it, but someone used to say that when you oppose an ideology, in about 50 to 60 years, whatever ideology you're opposing, your society will take on the attributes of who you oppose. I want to go to one of our experts when it comes to dystopian societies. Davey, talk to me about Australia and some of the things that they're going to do that are going to try to mimic what Trudeau is doing.
Yeah. Well, Anthony Albanese has got a very, very similar bill. He's trying to pass at the moment too. The interesting thing, of course, his own party, the Labor Party, will be exempt from any censorship or claims of misinformation or disinformation, which will be very convenient to them. But the bill they're trying to pass is very, very similar. You know, they're concerned about Twitter and Facebook. And, you know, misinformation, disinformation is causing division within the community and undermines trust that can threaten public health and safety. So, again, it's coming here too. And it's not just here, they're pushing it elsewhere, but it was a big thing here this week too. They're really trying to push it.
Real quick question, Davey. Has Albanese ever talked at the World Economic Forum?
I don't think he has. No, I don't think he has himself. But I know other members of the Labor Party, prominent members of the Labor Party, have been there.
Jay, the EU has already gotten on board with this censorship. And in fact, Twitter just gave in to free speech, gave up free speech there in Europe. They just this week, he allows them to censor it.
And
not here.
I would point out concerning Australia, David did not mention, but I'm sure he will affirm, you have a figure in Victoria in Australia, Daniel Andrews.
Daniel Andrews?
He is almost a twin, an ideological twin brother of Justin Trudeau. He's just the same, cut from the same piece of cloth as Trudeau. They're just the same. And in some ways, he may even be worse. He's an extremely dangerous threat to Australian democracy. But he has a national profile. He's not just a figure in Melbourne and its environs. He has national punch. And again, anything Trudeau does, he would do the same in Australia, easily. Would you agree?
I would totally agree. And just I kind of have a bit of a chuckle at the moment because people are starting to get to see the real nature of Daniel Andrews come out, just what a gutless coward that he is. He was involved in an automobile accident with a cyclist a while ago. And of course, he was blaming it on his wife being the driver. He's been caught out that was a pack of lies. He managed to avoid having to be drug and alcohol tested. This is all starting to come out, so he's keeping a bit of a low profile at the moment because this is going to do harm to him. So let's hope he will go.
I see the two-tier justice system is alive and well in Australia as well.
Yeah, the only problem if he goes, though, look what happened in New Zealand. They got rid of Jacinda Ardern, and the guy they've got now, he's been over at the Davos thing in China at the moment, and he has really just revealed himself for what he is.
Yeah, it's just like the Chicago. You get rid of Lori Lightfoot, you get somebody worse.
You get somebody worse. Just wanted to mention, because it's in my neck of the woods. Also, we have, I forgot the amount of celebrities, but there's a video with, I think, 30 plus celebrities asking for Facebook, Twitter, and social media to ban and cancel anyone who speaks against the Pride. And that video is available and making its way through the airwaves.
There's a petition for 250 stars or so-called stars out there in Hollywood too that just came out petitioning for the exact same thing.
I believe that's the one I'm talking about, but I think
I
there's also a video circulating somewhere. All right. Well, that's enough about the Ministry of Truth, because it seems to be a global thing at this point. I wanted to switch gears and talk a little bit about the Supreme Court ruling on affirmative action, because it is got the lefties up enraged. Jacob, let's start with you. Let's talk about the Supreme Court and the affirmative action case.
I watched Joy Reid, who's a detestable figure. She's a pathetic, dishonest, detestable figure who's a absolutely decrepit excuse for a journalist. She's just a propagandist and a mouthpiece for the ultra left. Her comments did not address the legality or the constitutionality or the ethics of the issue. She avoided the ethics. She avoided the constitutionality. She avoided the legality. She didn't look at the legal, constitutional, or ethical arguments for or against affirmative action. All she did was ridicule, belittle, engage in character assassination of a fellow Black member of the Supreme Court who was a conservative and a constitutionalist. Her response was to attack another Black for supporting it. She didn't address any of the issues concerning affirmative action or its repeal. That didn't concern her. All she wanted to do was rip into another Black who supported abolition of affirmative action. Many Blacks support it. What could be more demeaning to Blacks than to say you have your position or your job or your education because you're Black, not because of your ability? What an insult to the highly intelligent and highly qualified Blacks I know. And there's no shortage of them. I know plenty of Black people who are as smart as anybody. Why should they be demeaned with this affirmative action label? They don't need that. They don't need such nonsense. Now, you have somebody who actually was culturally white, who played the race card for political reasons, like Barack Obama. If you want to consider him to be Black, even though he's culturally white, he's an affirmative action Black. He couldn't do anything. He was a social organizer. That's all he was. He had no real ability in terms of management. He had no experience, nothing. He knew how to lie to stupid people, but that's his only real skill. He's an affirmative action Black, not a very clever person, except in his capacity to deceive silly people. Okay, I'll give him that. But I look at Dr. Thomas Sowell, the most brilliant political economist in the world. I look at Dr. Ben Carson, the greatest pediatric brain surgeon perhaps in human history. I look at the late Herman Cain, a rocket scientist who became a businessman of great success at his time. What an insult to Black people to say the only way you can get ahead is to play the race card. That is absolute nonsense. Now, suppose somebody was to say, we need equality, but equality is not equality in terms of equal opportunity. It's equity, it's outcome. We need to have more white people playing for the NBA. It's not fair that there are more white people or more Hispanic people or more Asian people getting paid millions and millions, and Kobe Bryant and these guys have made millions and tens of millions, hundreds of millions. LeBron James is a billionaire. It's not fair. White people, Hispanic people, Native American Indians, Asians were being discriminated against by the NBA. We demand equality, which is equity, outcome-based. Now look, if you get a white player like Larry Bird who's good enough to play for the NBA, God bless him. But I want my team to win. If I lived in LA, I'd want the Lakers to win. I guess I'm from New York. I want the Knicks to win. I don't care what color this player's skin is. It is just as stupid. Nobody would say the NBA is unfair to white people or to Asian people or to... Nobody would say that. It's the same thing. You have two students with co-equal test scores and grades. An Asian with these fairly high test scores and grades would have a 25% chance of admission to an Ivy League school. An Asian. A black would have a 95%. And they say you're discriminating against minorities. No, Asians are a minority, and they're being discriminated against. To penalize people for their achievement, for their hard work and hard study, to penalize people for hard work and hard study on the basis of skin color in order to reward people for underachievement. This is racism. This is pure racism. The Supreme Court, for once, did something good. And it doesn't do good things too often, but it did some good things within the last year. One of which is it struck out against systemic racism. Affirmative action is systemic racism. To penalize somebody who's more qualified because of their skin color in order to reward somebody who's less qualified because of their skin color, that is racism. That is just as bad as what was done to blacks. It was done to Jews. It was done to Hispanics. It shouldn't be done to anybody. First initial, last name. Somebody's skin color, ethnicity, someone's political party affiliation, someone's religious beliefs, somebody's sexual orientation. None of that should be brought into consideration. First initial, last name, show us your grades and your scores. Pure meritocracy. That is it. That is equality. You cannot have equality and equity at the same time. If you want equity, you can't have equality. If you want equality, you cannot have equity. It doesn't bother me one bit that these basketball players making tens of millions of dollars a year, plus what they get for endorsements on top of it. It doesn't bother me one bit that 90% of them are black. They're the best people for that thing. Let them do it. It doesn't bother me that Asians outperform Caucasians on average in mathematical skills. It doesn't bother me one bit. Silicon Valley needs them. Our own high-tech industries need them. They're a national asset. It doesn't bother me one bit. And it shouldn't bother anybody else either. Now, the only academic institutions of higher learning that are exempt from this are West Point, Annapolis, the Air Force Academy, the Coast Guard Academy, and the Merchant Marine Academy. They are governed separately, and the court ruling does not apply to them. So therefore, Biden can continue to make the future military commanders of America less qualified than the ones who should be getting the appointments to the military academies based on further damage being done by Joe Biden to the American military. But thank God it was abolished today. Two liberal states, Michigan and California, already abolished race-based admissions policies. And they're both very liberal, very, very blue states. Both of them. But at least I know a black person coming out of Berkeley is coming out of Berkeley because he's qualified. because he passed the exams. He passed the test. He's not an affirmative action parasite. He's a man or a woman of achievement. This denigration of blacks by affirmative action, designed to make a permanent underclass. Well, how are blacks supposed to get ahead? Notice they're avoiding the real issue. I'll tell you how you get ahead. You replace the state school system with charter schools and faith-based schools. You will see how many minority youths and how many black youths are just as competitive with Caucasians and Asians in getting into top universities. You'll see it. The problem is you have a school system designed to fail with teachers, many of whom are from the bottom 40% of their class, teachers unions that do not represent good teachers, but only bad ones, and get tenured for people who ought to be working at a fast food joint. A teachers union that is only a political campaign fund for the Democratic Party, and they're interested in social political programming, not education, indoctrinating, not educating. Get rid of the worthless garbage school system and stop wasting money on it. Stop throwing good money after bad. Stop throwing money out the window. Get rid of the state school systems and replace it with charter schools. They are proven to work. That is why the teachers' unions and the educational bureaucracy is against it. It's because they work. You've got a school system that's a dinosaur from an industrial age, from a pre-high-tech age. The school system was designed to groom people to work in a factory culture. Those jobs are largely gone to robots, or they're gone to third world countries with its cheap labor. We need a school system that's modern. They're keeping a corpse alive, an artificial life support system. They're feeding a dinosaur that should be left to go and become extinct. It's not the universities or the colleges where the problem begins. You want to correct the problem? Go to the source. Get rid of taxpayer-funded state education and give people tax credits instead and grants to put their kids into charter schools. You will see what it does for the inner city youth. You'll see what it does. Now, something else that they don't want to talk about. Statistically, the relationship is undeniable between academic underperformance and absentee fatherhood. In the late 1940s, it would have been a disgrace in the Afro-American community to have a child out of wedlock because of faith-based family values. Now, 3 out of 4 Afro-American children are born out of wedlock with absentee fathers. What chance are those kids going to have with no role model and no breadwinner? That the federal government, the Democratic Party, going back to LBJ, has replaced a black man with a welfare check and food stamps. What's going to happen to these kids? You are not going to fix the problem with affirmative action. They've had affirmative action for nearly 50 years and it hasn't worked. It hasn't moved the needle one bit. In overall terms, it has not caused any socioeconomic advancement into the professions for black people, except for those who get there by affirmative action quotas. In other words, vote Democrat or you can't get ahead. Vote liberal or you can't get ahead. You don't get ahead by studying the way the Koreans Americans do, or the way the Taiwanese Americans do, or the way the Cambodian Americans do. You don't get ahead by the way the Asian Americans do, by hitting the books. You don't get ahead that way. You get ahead by voting for Harris and Biden and Obama. Well, no, you're not going to get ahead. You're going to stay where you always were, the lower man on the totem pole. Today was a victory. It was a victory against racism, and it was a victory for black achievement, because now the blacks who go to universities will be the ones who should go to universities, who deserve to go to universities. They're just as capable of everyone else. What has failed the black community is absentee fatherhood. What has failed the black community are the teachers' unions and the public school system. That is what has failed the black community. And affirmative action is not going to fix it. It hasn't been able to fix it for 50 years, and it will never fix it. You don't correct an injustice with another injustice. You don't correct discrimination with discrimination. You don't correct racism with more racism. You abolish racism. You abolish discrimination. First initial, last name. Period. Full stop.
Thank you, Jacob. David, I wanted to follow up with a question from you.
Okay.
You grew up during the time of civil rights, and I just wanted to ask you the question, how did we go from basically Caucasians and African Americans working together, protesting to bring what was at the time supposed to be equal rights, not equality of outcome? How did we go from there to where we have now affirmative action, and now the Supreme Court striking it down?
Well, for me, I was real lucky in that I lived around the world, and in my elementary school, it was mixed. We had Guamanians, I had Black people. So I thought that was normal. I came to California. I had after that, a lot of Hispanics, Blacks, and everything in the California schools, and so I always had Black friends, Hispanic friends, even up through high school. Now I saw through racism when I was in the South and saw what it was like. I saw people, whites that were rednecks. They're still rednecks today in the South. But the thing is that what happened is that my generation, Jacob's generation, we were critical thinkers. We were taught to question authority. We were taught to make sure that we question people and rules and government. And so we were able to work together, like you talked about. We were able to stand together. And I could never get the thing that a Black man needed a stool to stand on to be equal with me. The guy that helped me with my trig was Black. So, how was he not equal? How was he not better? Because he was helping me with my trig, So how is my friend, Miss Freeman, who played on my baseball team that was super fast, hit ahead of me, and if he got on first and I hit just a long single or a double, I'm so slow, he's scoring. You know what I mean? So I wanted him on my team. I didn't see that he was less than me, and I just wasn't raised with that. But what has happened is with the like Jacob talked about, with the Black man being removed from the house and a check inserted for the woman, we saw a breakdown. We saw the liberalization, and then we saw white guilt building and wanting to go overboard and trying to help everybody by giving them what Jacob says is equity, okay, which is not equality. And that's the name change game that they're playing, just like with genders and all this. And so what you have now is the NEA has for years been grooming people to not think. And so the inability to have critical thinking, the inability to be able to carry an argument, to be able to produce an argument. I seen today national championship debating, 2 Black women won, but couldn't even make a cognitive argument for their cause. They were stumbling over words and using the words that I wouldn't use concerning people, and they were won, and they were put up on television as something special. I couldn't even understand the argument, and how did they win in a debate? But this is what's happening, is we're giving people passes and allowing them to be incompetent and stuff. And so, yes, I'm happy this law was passed, because I never saw a Hispanic guy, a Black guy, a Japanese guy, or anybody being my inferior. my inferior. You know, I even remember the black dude that taught me about being cool. I mean, I thought that was great as a teenager, you know. So I've always respected him, but this has gone so far that it's just crazy. But what has happened is I agree with what Jacob said about all this passing, and I'm happy with it. In fact, I wrote on my Twitter several replies to black people and on this that agreed with it. The thing is, Harvard has already found the backdoor way, and they're going to apply it. They allow one little mistake that Roberts put in, and is that you can take race in a very narrow box and put it in there so that you can, if they have a story how race has affected their lives, they will be able to bring that in and look at it. And so Harvard has already jumped on it. Biden has already said to tell his administration, look, we don't like this. Let's do what we can to reverse it. He is saying, I don't care what the Supreme Court is. And see, that's what we're fighting nowadays, is like, we win a victory, but as soon as the victory's out, the opposition is already at work to undermine it and to overturn it. Christians, you can't let down. You have to stop. Christians at Google got stood up against drag queen performance and got them to unendorse it. So there is hope if Christians will stand up for their rights. And I do like that the ruling today that a Christian didn't have to work on Sunday. They won that. And then the other ruling for Christians that they don't have to produce work for LBG crew, but over a First Amendment right of free speech. So we've got to stand up for rights. We got to do what Jacob said earlier, appeal to Caesar. If they don't, we're all going to hang separately. So,
can I interject something, James, in addition to what David has shared?
Please do.
70% of the American public agreed with ending affirmative action. 70%. But the mainstream media is presenting it as there's an outrage, a moral outrage in America against the Supreme Court's decision. In fact, the decision reflected the opinion and conviction of 70% of the population. You don't have news, you have propaganda, the usual cast of liars. Secondly, I've always marveled at Black American overachievement in things like music. Duke Ellington, Billy Strayhorn, Louis Armstrong, Thelonious Monk, take your pick, going back to Scott Joplin, going back, in fact, to the mid-19th century. Every kind of music, apart from Broadway, which was influenced by the operettas of Gilbert and Sullivan from Britain, and apart from country and western, which originally came from the British Isles, every kind of indigenous American music was begun by Black jazz and gospel, rock and roll, disco, take your pick. It all came from Black people. Did they need affirmative action? No, they needed hard work and talent.
Yeah.
Black overachievement in sports. How can there's only 30% of the population? How come a disproportionately high amount of the best? You know, in the Second World War, Hitler was a racist, not Nazi, of course, but he was a racist. And he was a Darwinist. And he believed in the Übermensch, the master race of the Aryan race and things like this. And he really looked down upon blacks, obviously. Joe Louis, Pete Max Schmeling, Hitler was so disgusted he was angry. A Black American, Jesse Owen, he's getting all these gold medals in the Olympics in Munich. Hitler was just walked out in just anger out of the Olympic Stadium in Munich. These were Black Americans who humiliated the Nazi Übermensch. Before the war, when the Olympics were Black achievement in sports, and it didn't come about because of affirmative action. It came about through hard work. And that's the only way anybody has ever gotten a piece of the pie, is hard work. And it's the only way they will ever get a piece of the pie. But the liberal Democrat establishment don't want black people to have a piece of the pie. They want them to have crumbs. Here's a few crumbs, affirmative action. You can have the crumbs. No.
Yeah.
I want to see upward mobility. And affirmative action is an obstacle to upward mobility for minorities, especially for black people. There's a third thing that David also mentioned that should be highlighted. I'm glad the Supreme Court decided that blue-collar workers in America and tradesmen don't have to pay the college debt for graduates who make more money than they do. Why should somebody have to pay the college tuition of somebody who makes more money than you do? That's another Democratic Party idea of equality and justice. You have to pay for the education of somebody who makes more money than you do. That was another good Supreme Court decision. And of course, the other one was for these Christian company in Colorado, on the basis of religious freedom, you cannot force them to engage in things that are contrary to the moral convictions of their faith. So I don't like the Supreme Court. I certainly don't like Roberts. But nonetheless, it's been a fairly good year. And although I'm disappointed with him in many respects, we can thank God for Donald Trump. If he didn't appoint these conservative justices, this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. You know, Jacob, Clarence Thomas, in his rebuke, he went after the first black Supreme Court justice, whose name?
Thurgood Marshall?
No, first woman, the one
Okay.
who was, yeah, the new one.
Jackson,
Anyway, he said, look, what you're doing in this ruling is you are trapping a generation of blacks in error. You're actually cheating them by telling them they need this, that they have to have this to get ahead. And so he told them, you're cheating them. But also, you know, when you look at the consequences that she's trying to put in here and how the media tried to spin it. Oh, I mean, they used hyperbole to say things like, oh, this is going to end when there's no women allowed in college. They were using all these crazy things. They were taking it and extrapolating it so far that it went into just pure nonsense and not dealing, like you said, with the argument and the anger and everything. But they hadn't even read the law. They didn't even look at what it was trying to say, you know, so don't think they're quitting.
Yes, for sure.
Just a reminder to everyone, we're about an hour into this program. If you have a question for Jacob, please put it on Rumble so that we can put him on the hot seat when we go to backstage. We have some interesting material for you there. We can only talk about there without being censored and getting a community guideline strike. So please, once this broadcast ends on YouTube, join us backstage.
Jay, will he really tell us what he thinks?
I'm not sure. I think he always does. So, moving on to our next topic, the Gender Affirmation Bill in California, AB 957. It is targeted against the custodial rights of a guardian if a child wants to transition. Well, now the state can step in and say, no, you don't have any say. We're gonna transition your kid. We're gonna give him hormone blockers. We're gonna give him a sex change, and him or her. And you have nothing to say about it. We'll start. Actually, I'd like to start with David on this topic. What do you think about this? It seems to be a trend going everywhere that parents have no rights.
Yep, that's the starting point. They don't have the right to their children. Now, parents are starting to stand up. Many people that are in the Islamic religion are standing up. They're not allowing this, and it is really a vulnerable point, I believe, because parents across the USA are getting involved in school boards and getting involved on getting elected to office. And so hopefully on local levels, and then as they move up to state level, they can change this. And so maybe this next election might well, this is the off year, so you might see more elections with more states boards, more state elections that will change things. And so that is my hope. But just trying to say that you have no opinion or direction in your children's life ought to send a horde down every parent's backbone. But when you also think about the evil that is coming out of this, that will affect Christians, because they'll say you can't, the conversion starts with this, and a doctor can't undo what's done. But more laws that are coming and say you can't tell if that conversion gets through, then they'll charge us with conversion from trying to get a person to go from Islam to Christianity. It's a never-ending road till all of our rights are stripped of us, all of our God-given rights.
To your point, David, I thought conversion therapy was illegal in California. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. It's the wrong type of conversion.
No, that's Pakistan. It would be easy to mix them up.
No. Jacob, talk to me a little bit about your thoughts. How is California?
Yes, the need to affirm the gender identity of a child, of a minor. Well, as has been pointed out, you're talking about the Hitler Youth. You're talking about Stalin's indoctrination of the Soviet youth. You're talking about what the Roman Catholic Church did in the Papal States to Catholic children. There was a case where they had a Jewish girl and a maid baptized the Jewish girl, and the Pope actually sent the papal police to take the Jewish baby girl away from her parents and put her in a convent to be brought up Catholic, because a maid sprinkled her and pronounced her to be a Catholic. These things have gone on in dictatorships, from the papacy to Stalin to Hitler. Now it's come to the United States and to California. We've already mentioned on Catching Up that there are 2 states that are proclaiming themselves as being quote unquote refuge states, where they will take children for conversion therapy and protect them from the legal authority of the parents in other states. They're wanting to do this. Now, this is hell damning, but they're doing it, or certainly wanting to. In California, they want to make it prosecutable. You will be able to bring criminal charges. The state can bring criminal charges for child abuse to parents who do not give this kind of affirmation. This is absolutely demonic. This is not the America we once knew. Persecution is coming. Fortunately, so is Jesus. It's not going to get any better. This week, I was watching video clips, news clips of homosexuals painted up in their so-called pride flag, using their bodies as flags with painting stripes, rainbows on their chests and things. And they were naked on bicycles, riding in parades and pageants in front of children, openly promoting homosexuality, publicly naked, promoting homosexuality in front of children. There were people dressed up in sadomasochism outfits. This is in front of children publicly, and they have a legal right to do it. But of course, if you oppose it, you can get arrested. They'll arrest you. They won't arrest the people doing this to the children. Come quickly, Lord Jesus.
Yeah, sorry.
When the governor of California, who may be the next Democratic Party nominee to be president, when he stands before the judgment seat of Christ, it's going to be quite a trial. Gavin Newsom, what a son of the devil.
Can I ask a quick question, Jay?
Sure.
Jacob, for years and years in Canada, in the United States, we had state schools taking indigenous people and converting them to Catholicism. And this is done in other places. And then we seen all this government endorsed, and that was all government endorsed. We saw United States, if an Indian American
Yes.
Indian was given an abortion, they would give her also sterilizer. And so, do you think these people actually, actually believe that their control of people's lives, their history is not good, and so how can they even think, or we even think, that what they want to do is in any fashion good? Their history isn't right, and that's kind of a reflection of what's coming.
They're historically blind and they're intellectually blind. Look how many liberal Democrats ignore the fact that their party is the party of slavery and Jim Crow. Look at it. Of Woodrow Wilson, pro-Klan. It was the party of the Klan in our lifetime. They just ignore it. It's not just blindness, it's willful blindness. Remember, when you become willfully blind, not blind, but willfully blind of the word of God, you're going to lose not just your soul, you're going to lose your mind.
That's what we're seeing.
They're losing their mind. To think that that somebody can play for the girls' team if they're a biological male and be considered a woman, they've lost their mind. Now, again, it doesn't matter how educated they are. They're stupid. Professing to be wise, they have become fools.
Yep.
The takeaway
They all forget Biden worked with a grand dragon in the Senate. He was part of the separationists.
Biden himself had pro-segregationist policies while in the Senate, but they ignore it.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton's mentor was Byrd, who was a grand dragon of the Klan, senator from West Virginia. George Favor, another segregationist in Arkansas, was the political mentor Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
These are Al Gore's father voted against civil rights. He was an ardent segregationist. These liberal Democrats are the sons and daughters of segregation. And now they're the champions of the very people that they held back. No, they're still holding them back. They're just doing it by different means.
Yep. Thanks, Jacob.
And just to refocus, if you have children in California, make sure you flee with them. Flee and go to another place.
Yeah.
The next story we have is a continuation. In Britain, the long-awaited ban on conversion therapy is sitting on the Prime Minister's red box. It awaits his sign-off and changes, but the current draft covers sexuality and gender and includes consent clause, which won't protect those who volunteer for conversion therapy. So the way that California is going, it seems the UK is mimicking. They love Newsom and his government so much they wish to, emulate the exact same laws.
Now understand, the British government is ostensibly conservative. It is the British equivalent of American rhinos, of Bush and Romney and McConnell, people like that. The present British government is a Tory, is a Conservative Party government, but it's not a Thatcherite conservative or an ideological conservative. It's like a rhino. That's what it is.
Anything
Now,
to add, David? Oh, I'm so go ahead, Jacob. Sorry.
Schools in Britain, as in America, you can have drag queens reading stories to little kids in school at the taxpayer's expense, promoting homosexuality among little kids. But if you have conversion therapy, something that points children towards their biological sexual identity chromosomally, they want to make that against the law. You can teach kids who are chromosomally male or female to say that they are not male or female, even though that's what they are biologically. That's legal. But if you want laws to rechannel these children with parental consent, even with the children's consent, back towards their natural chromosomal identity, they want that to be against the law. That is how sick and perverted it has become.
Jay, I don't like to recommend a lot of videos and stuff, but the Babylon Bee did a wonderful sarcastic video of an alien coming to the earth to check it out and see if it needs to be destroyed. And he's met by 3 leaders who greet them as he, them, or he, me, or something like that. They get their pronouns all out there to the alien, and the alien has to listen to all this and all the genders and everything, and he has to make a decision about whether Earth should be destroyed based on these 3 people who have pronouns. It's worth a look.
Yeah, Babylon Bee is definitely good at satire for sure. The next story we have is the riots in France. Paris today. France said on Friday the coming hours would be decisive after 3 nights of riots since police officers shot dead a teenager at a traffic stop in a working-class suburb of Paris. The violence has plunged Emmanuel Macron into the gravest crisis of his leadership since the Yellow Vest protests that started in 2018. Unrest has flared nationwide, including cities such as Marseille, Lyon, Toulouse, Strasbourg, and Lille, as well as Paris. You brought this story to my attention, Jacob. The French are standing up for themselves?
I was in France a few days ago. I just got back before this happened. This is not the first time. Paris is surrounded by a ring called the banlieue, and it is nearly 100% Islamic and Afro-Islamic, or Muslim Islamic, or Berber Islamic. Nearly 100% Islamic. Twice, they had riots that went on for 2 to 3 weeks. Billions of dollars worth of damage. Billions. Burning cars, shops, everything. Billions. Rioting happened twice. This is the 3rd time it is happening. The 3rd time it is happening. For every action, there will be an equal and opposite reaction. France colonized North Africa, Algeria. That's where most of these people have come from, and their children have grown up in France. Only they never became French. They remained culturally Algerian because of their religion. Some exceptions, but not a lot. Muslims don't assimilate into American culture. Hispanics assimilate into American culture, okay? They will assimilate. Italians will assimilate. Asians will assimilate into mainstream American culture. Give them 1 to 2 generations, they're all speaking English, and they're all got a favorite baseball team or whatever it is. They will all assimilate into them. Muslims generally do not do that. Some do, most don't. Well, France, it's that to the 10th or 12th power. The size of the Islamic population in France is frightening. The low French birth rate and the high Muslim birth rate is changing the basic demographic of the country. As they get more people, as they get more political might, they get more aggressive. This is simply an outworking of the Islamic doctrine of Hudna. You say you're a peaceful people and you don't believe in peace, that you believe in peace until you get the numerical advantage to declare jihad. Now, people aren't putting it this way, but that's what it amounts to. It's not about the shooting of this Muslim youth. That is simply the excuse, the pretense for what is really happening in the social undercurrent, sociologically and politically in France. And it's not only France. We see this in Denmark. We see it in Sweden. We see it in Germany. We see it in England. But above all, we see it in France.
Wow.
Please pray for my wife. My wife is with relatives in the Jewish suburb of Marseille. And the Muslims in France really hate Jews. She's there looking after an aged relative, aged Holocaust survivor relative. And now the riots have spread from Paris, from the banlieue down to Marseille. And these people love to target Jews. So I'm a little bit concerned for my family at the moment. If you keep Pavia in prayer and her family, I would appreciate it.
Of course we will. Just it seems to me, Jacob, that Charles Martel should have just welcomed the Muslims at the Battle of Toulouse, and just we prepared this feast for you. Just come in. We have plenty of land.
Yeah,
that's right.
Because that's what the politicians are doing today.
That's right.
Well, while Rome burned, Nero fiddled while Rome burned. I just saw a report a day ago. While Paris is burning, Macron is busy doing
Elton John.
dancing with Elton John. Wondering if he's going to repeat the Rick Warren kiss that was heard around the world type of thing.
I was going to say the same thing, Davey, that Nero watched Rome burn, and Macron is watching Elton play.
Stole his thunder, Davey. How dare you?
Nah, that's we were the same thought, though, man. At the same time, that's pretty cool.
All right, our next story brought to us by Jacob again. This is a great story. I did not know this. I grew up in the Lutheran Church before I kind of went the way of a carnal Christian. So it's kind of shocking that the Missouri Synod, which was a very conservative synod, very scriptural, very good on doctrine for a very long time, has gone the way of woke. So I have a video that I'd like to play. Just give me 1 second. No, we don't want to look at him again. Let's go to Mr. Turnipseed.
Could you give everyone a background to how this started? And I think the scope, if you agree with this, we can start here, is when you decided to come out and critique publicly the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod's new publication of the larger catechism that included commentary that was, should I say, unorthodox? And that kind of puts you on the map and gained the attention of the bigwigs in the denomination. Is that correct?
Yes, and unorthodox, I think that's I think the audience would understand it more. A lot of it was just explicitly woke. Like you had essays literally entitled Social Justice and Lutheranism and all this other stuff. Essays saying that gentrification was a sin. Essays saying that self-defense was immoral. You only defend your neighbor or yourself for your neighbor, and all this other stuff that's, I would say, is very anti-scriptural.
So, anti-scriptural, but in line with the modern doctrines of today of wokeism and non-gentrification, probably a little bit of pride in there, if you know what I mean. Jacob, why are all these denominations just rolling over to this new system?
As you rightly pointed out, the Missouri Synod, and similarly somewhat to a degree the Wisconsin Synod, but we're talking about the Missouri Synod, were much more conservative doctrinally, at least on the fundamentals. They did not go down the ecumenical road. They did not get in bed with the Lutheran World Congress when it made its rapprochement with Rome. They didn't do those things. They were more conservative. Even 10 years ago, they were still more conservative. Now, they're the latest to roll over. We've seen it with the Southern Baptists. We've seen it with some Calvary chapels. Not all, but some. We've seen it certainly with the Methodists. We've seen it with every major Protestant denomination in Great Britain. And now we're seeing it with the Missouri Synod Lutherans. They're all going. They are all going. They are all on the road to Babylon. They've compromised on the homosexual issue, and they have embraced much of the so-called woke agenda. It's political. But what really struck me listening to Ryan Turnipseed was the way that they carried out a organized vendetta against him as a student for speaking out and for raising credible issues. The synod and its leadership behaved exactly the way the Sanhedrin behaved towards Jesus. It was all political. It was all connived. It was all set up. Now, given the fact that they're Lutheran, and I'm somebody who has a high view of early Luther, a negative view of the later Luther. But in the beginning, I had a high view of him. Here I stand. When the Roman papacy, certainly under Pope Julius, but others, came against Luther, they issued a papal bull, a good name for it. They didn't respond to the 95 Theses or the theological points or doctrinal points Luther was raising. It was all political. They just went after him for challenging it. The very way that the papal curia went after Luther in the character and spirit of the Sanhedrin going after Jesus is now the very way the Missouri Synod has gone after Ryan Turnip. They became what they were to be the alternative to be the opponent to. They have become what they were against. There's nothing Lutheran about the Missouri Synod anymore.
That is a great summation, Jacob. If Luther were to post his 95 Theses against the modern church, in the Missouri Synod would send excommunication bull against him.
Of course.
Great analogy. David, do you have anything to add to that? You were talking about you had talked to some of the librarian, I believe, of the Missouri Synod.
Yeah, they're located in Springfield, Missouri, and I used to call up the library there trying to get information. We didn't have the internet then. You actually had to go to a library and look at books. And so to get information, and I found out they had all this great information dating back 100 years on cults. And so I was able to call. I became friends with the librarian there, and he gave me a lot of good information, told me some books I could buy that would get this information and places to look. So they were very solid. I got to talk to them about doctrine and things like this. So I'm shocked. I am shocked because now all the denominations are falling. It's just everywhere. They're all gone, I think, Jacob. I don't know one solid one.
No.
You?
Some haven't fallen as far as others, but they're all in decline.
Yeah.
It's a shame. It's a shame. Our next segment is called Biden and Gomorrah. We have a bunch of topics for this. I don't think we're going to get to all of them, but we'll get to as many as we can before we go to backstage because we are running out of time at this point. First one I wanted to bring up is something that we talked a little bit in the pre-show. Someone here has some inside sources about the party that was happening in the White House while Joe Biden was doing his let's call it a pride rally on the lawn. There was new heights of depravity going on in the White House. David, do you have any information that you can share without divulging your sources?
Yes, look, we had an inside source tell us if you thought what was going on the White House lawn was bad enough, that wasn't nothing compared to what was actually going on in the White House at the Biden Pride party that he held. Every kind of debauchery that you could think of, and then probably more some stuff that we couldn't even talk about on the air. It was that bad.
Wow. Creepy Joe Biden had depravity at his White House? Say it ain't so, Joe. Jacob, do you have anything to add?
If anyone is surprised, I'd have to ask what planet they're from.
That's a good question.
What do you expect?
Yeah.
All right. This
You
one,
had this one,
oh, go
that
ahead.
one transvestite exposed his quote unquote breasts, remember?
I do.
And they and how do people like that get on the White House grounds? You know what I'm saying? But then again, Bill Clinton let Yasser Arafat in, so that was
Yeah, I think that transgender person was an invited guest, a prominent invited guest.
Yeah.
Come quickly.
Please, Lord. Please, Lord. The next topic we have, I wanted to talk a little bit about, while they're partying on the White House lawn, while they're spending taxpayer money to promote Pride, let's take a look about what the White House has to say about the spending on the war in Ukraine. We've got another video for you. Let's see. Here we go.
Earlier this year, during the department's regular oversight of our execution of presidential drawdown broadly. Following up from some announcements earlier this year, during the department's regular oversight of our execution of presidential drawdown authority for Ukraine, we discovered inconsistencies in equipment valuation for Ukraine. In a significant number of cases, services used replacement costs rather than net book value, thereby overestimating the value of the equipment drawn down from U.S. stocks and provided to Ukraine. Once we discovered this misvaluation, the comptroller reissued guidance on March 31st, clarifying how to value equipment in line with the financial management regulation and DoD policy to ensure we use the most accurate of accounting methods. We have confirmed that for FY23, the final calculation is $3.6 billion, and for FY22, it is $2.6 billion, for a combined total of $6.2 billion. These valuation errors in no way limit or restricted the size of any of our PDAs or impacted the provision of support to Ukraine. And while the DoD retains the authority to utilize the recaptured PDA, this has no bearing on appropriated USAI or Ukraine PDA replenishment funding approved by Congress.
I don't understand. Where does all this come from? How do you get funding for something like this? You don't actually think they spend $20,000 on a hammer, $30,000 on a toilet seat, do you?
Yes. $50,000 on a hammer, $20,000 on a toilet seat. And $6 billion that was not accounted, right? That now is freed up to go to Ukraine. Very, very convenient.
yes.
Let's start with David on this one. David, you told me that the hammer and the toilet seat actually comes. That's an actual historical thing. I did not know this.
Yeah, there was I think it was a $50,000 toilet that was on a transport aircraft. They had to have it specially vacuumed and everything, but I mean, they don't cost $50,000 for a toilet that works in an airplane in civilian aircraft. But if you can get $50,000 for an aircraft, for a toilet, well, that's what the military would do. And this hammer, same thing. $20,000 that they were costed for this and everything. So there's a lot of this. There was a company out of Missouri run by two little old ladies that found out that they could sell a bolt cheap for like $1 to the military and then charge them $200,000 for shipping it. And so there was all sorts of things like this going on, and they charge them millions and millions of shipping, and nobody says anything. And then with Ukraine, it's pretty simple. They got the friends and family discount, and they didn't tell the military that they were entitled to this. So now they get $6 billion more of our equipment, and which we'll never get back and will never be repaid.
Jacob, my question to you is the amounts of money that they're just doling out. Obviously, there is no way that they tax people enough to actually cash these checks that they're writing.
Absolutely not.
So money means nothing.
Well, it's hard to believe when you look at what the Biden administration has done, certainly. And they were not the first or the only one, but they're the worst thus far. And what the Fed is doing, it's difficult to believe that they're not trying to deliberately crash the system. I'm not trying to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but how else do you explain it? How else do you explain such fiscal irresponsibility and recklessness? Not to mention the fact that this is not a complicated accounting issue. In any conventional audit, you'd be able to find those discrepancies pretty quickly. And if you have good accounts payable and accounts receivable management system, which now you, even with Excel, even with something as simple as Excel, FTC, you can account for your expenditures. How can they lose $6 billion?
Same way that the FDA lost $200 billion of COVID money.
Yeah.
I don't think they lost
They're
it.
incompetent.
I don't think they lost it. I just think it went to, to
Different
family,
people.
friends,
Family, friends. That's right.
business associates.
Yeah.
Well, I think that is about all we have time for the front stage. We want to thank you for watching us, but please stop watching us on YouTube. Please go to Rumble. Please sign up for Moriel TV. Please go to anywhere but YouTube. We're going to go out of YouTube right now and go to Backstage. We're going to ask some of the questions that you have submitted. And also, we're going to look at a few more videos. And we're going to give you our thoughts that we can give you without worrying about community guideline strikes. But for now, we want to thank you. Even if you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching, catching up. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your prayers. And we just are so grateful for you. Anyway, we'll see you in Backstage. Hello, and thank you for watching Moriel TV. There are so many things that are happening at Moriel Ministries worldwide, from the Philippines to Japan to India to Africa and back to Europe and the United States. So many of our brothers and sisters are spreading the good news of Jesus Christ to this lost world. We are so thankful for your prayers. God has been faithful and has blessed us in so many ways. If you'd like to partner with our efforts abroad and at home, please take a moment to click the link in the description and help us as the Lord leads you. Thank you very much, and God bless.